So, as I'm sure many of you have already noticed, if you follow the news day to day, there are already rumors circulating regarding an RTX 5000 Super Series from Nvidia, and I have to admit that when I first saw these rumors appearing a few days or like a week ago or something, I was a bit annoyed, and that's because a lot of the press was covering these rumors from online forums as fact, as full confirmation that the Super Series is coming and that we know exactly what the specs are, despite some of the people in those forums, if you look it up, making fun of the press for always copying things they say that they themselves are not sure of. So, yeah, that annoyed me, but hey, as you can tell from the title of this video, I myself have some stuff to confirm about what is going on so far regarding the 5000 Super Series. But that's what I want to start this video with, by telling you that it is not 100% confirmed when it will launch or exactly what the configurations are. People I've talked to behind the scenes say that the idea of a Super Series has been thrown around by people at Nvidia for the entire generation of Blackwell so far. So what I'm about to tell you is likely to happen today, could change, and people should not take it as a 100% fact, but I think the details around what I'm about to leak today are very interesting from a source that was willing to be quoted for this video. So let me put this on screen here. This person, who works at an AIB that of course works with Nvidia, told me this week that they've had 24 gigabyte 5080s and 18 gigabyte 5070 configurations in their labs since 2024. So before the 5090 even launched, these things were being tested and prepared for a potential launch. In fact, I was told that those leaked 5080 boxes from a few months ago with 24 gigabytes on them were connected to these projects. Basically, Nvidia has been telling them to put those variants on hold and wait until Nvidia has decided that they either need higher capacity cards to compete with AMD, or that GDDR7 high capacity modules become cheap enough to be worth it to put in gaming cards. I'm told there's multiple variants, of different binnings that Nvidia may choose based on how much supply versus how much price they want to go with and performance for whatever exact variant they select for a 24 gigabyte or 18 gigabyte 5070. And yeah, a lot of these AIBs have had the marketing materials and boxes done. They just need to know the final clocks and binnings Nvidia will choose for it to be classed as a 24 gigabyte model for them to be able to launch it. However, this week, this AIB was told that the Super Series is likely happening in 2025 and that it's going to probably be based on some finalized variants that they've already been testing for GB203, which is what goes in the 5080, or GB205, which is of course what goes in the 5070 as the 5080 Super 24 gigabyte and 5070 Super 18 gigabyte. Again, they've had multiple configurations of much higher clocked 5080s and 5070s with more VRAM in the labs for a while now, and now Nvidia's saying that's probably going to get a super branding. It's probably going to be one of the highest clocked models. Now, if this plan goes forward, though, this person estimated to me, and this surprised me a bit, that despite being the same core counts, full GB203, full GB205, that they think they can pull off another 7 to 15% average performance out of them by just upping clocks and upping power consumption and just giving it more RAM. Now, pricing is still undetermined, I'm told, but it kind of sounds, according to this person, like Nvidia will either keep the prices the same, so keep the same MSRP of $549 and $999, or that they might marginally increase them. Something like a $599 price for the 5070 18 gigabyte, or like $1199 for the 5080 24 gigabyte. Although they might not up that price at all over their predecessors, and that is because they are genuinely worried about how much market share RDNA 4 is taking. Although I will say this when it comes to price, I'm not sure how much it matters whatever MSRP Nvidia gives these cards unless they decide to massively up the supply of them. But I have to say that if Nvidia is aggressive with super pricing, and that is to say $600 or lower for the 5070 Super 18 gigabyte, or like the same $1,000 price for the 5080 24 gigabyte, if they do decide to do that, I would say that would be a pretty big indication that they're probably going to finally have a lot of supply for these cards, because I have to assume, I guess I don't know for a fact, but I have to assume that Nvidia is aware that if they have no supply, they're going to get nothing but bad reviews. And Nvidia is aware now that despite thinking reviews don't matter, they do. They are losing market share to AMD. And I do want to drill in on that for anybody that would say something like Nvidia doesn't need to be this aggressive. I actually think they do need to be, especially when it comes to the 5070 Super. I mean, we're already seeing the 5070 12GB go below MSRP in multiple regions and not go out of stock. Well, the RDNA 4 competitors of the 5070 are rising well above MSRP and still selling above MSRP, showing that many gamers right now are willing to pay more than the bottom asking price for an AMD card, but they're not willing to pay MSRP for a lot of Nvidia cards. I am sure that is what is scaring Nvidia and making them consider, I don't know, price matching the 5070 Super 18GB against the 9070 XT at $600, because it really needs to be there based on how the market is reacting so far. Sure, it has 2GB more RAM, but it will be slower. I think it needs to cost the same as the 9070 XT or less for the 5070 Super 18GB to sell. And, well, now I can already hear this. I'm sure there's a bunch of keyboard warriors in the comments right now getting ready to type, oh, but Nvidia should cost more for the same performance as AMD, right? Doesn't everybody agree on this? And that's when I'm now going to start transitioning into the 9070 XT review that you should have also seen in the title, because the answer to that question, should a Blackwell card for the same performance as RDNA 4 cost more? My answer is maybe not, actually, after finally using RDNA 4. And that is due to this fact that I am going to be unapologetic about pointing out over and over moving forward now that I have actually tested RDNA 4 myself. It's not just whispers online or some little thing that affects a random person here and there that you saw in an article about an Nvidia driver issue. If you want a stable graphics card in 2025, you choose Radeon, not Nvidia, and that is crazy to me. I thought I might see some extra issues with Nvidia versus Radeon once I tested them both next to each other for the first time in a while, but I didn't expect the difference to become this stark. And I want to go through a full review of the 9070 XT, talk about all the issues that I noticed were not because of Windows or something, but because I was using an Nvidia product for this many years, and that if you're having these issues, this is probably Nvidia's fault. And then I also want to leak FSR 4 coming to RDNA 3 when you should expect that to happen. But first, an ad from our sponsor, Micro Center. That's right, this piece of content is sponsored by Micro Center. And I usually say at the start of these ad breaks, I don't know really what you want me to say. Micro Center is fantastic. They have been voted America's favorite tech retailer by PC Mag recently, and they have incredible deals this month on desktops. There's a link in the description. Clicking on that link helps the channel a ton, and also helps you find the best deals on desktops from America's #1 PC retailer. Also, in a link below, you can sign up for the opening to the new Santa Clara location. Even if you're already a Micro Center customer, say you'll be in that area at some point, you sign up, you can get a free 128GB USB drive, and then also in a link below, you can check out Micro Center's GPU trade-in program if you want to get the RX 9070 XT or some other graphics card, which I think actually this month is a good time to do it. I'm going to talk about that more in a second. Go to that link to be able to trade in your card for a new one. And then also check out a link in the description for Micro Center news so you don't miss all of the upcoming releases. I want to thank Micro Center for sponsoring me in this video. As always, support Moore's Law is Dead by clicking on those links below and checking out Micro Center today. All right, so let us get to the RX 9070 XT review. And actually, if you can believe it, I'm going to start by talking about all these random little issues that I had that were gone once I switched to Radeon. Now, to be clear, the system that I upgraded, or I guess downgraded technically, from a 4090 to a 9070 XT this week, this system isn't some old, ancient, rotting install of Windows on an old Zen 3 platform. I've recently upgraded my PC to a Minis Forum, I think it's the BD790 X3D, a motherboard with a 7945HX X3D 16-core Zen 4 X3D CPU built into it, with a fresh install of Windows 11 Professional on a blazing fast, like 12 gigabytes per second, or it's a little more than that, Gen 5 M.2 SSD. This is a fresh install on a blazing fast system, so any issues I've been having are not just because I had an old install of Windows. And I'm just going to read from a list here of issues that went away for me that maybe you should think about this being caused by Nvidia, not something else. So, first of all, boot times are faster now. There were sometimes these weird 5 to 10 second delays where I got to the like Windows Hello screen, where you like press space bar and enter in your PIN number to log in. Sometimes there'd be like a 1 second delay of lagginess, like slowly typing in the PIN as you press it. And then after 5 seconds or so after booting up, it'd be fine. It'd be super smooth. That's gone. So that's a thing. In general, by the way, things seem to load faster. Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition, the benchmark that I run that comes with the game, sometimes that would take minutes to boot up and finally start. Not the case with AMD. And that's generally true of games in general. So many games boot up faster now with AMD versus Nvidia. Also, sometimes when I would switch screen resolutions, which could include just changing the frame rate, not just the resolution, there'd be weird black screen flickering. Sometimes it'd be hard for me to click yes, keep the new resolution before that like 30 or 15 or 10 second timer, depending on the application, if it's a game or something, would run out. And then I'd have to start it again and just wait like, well, the black screens were flickering. And then 5 seconds left. Yes, I approve this new screen resolution that I've selected. Screen resolution switching is way quicker and more consistent now. Heck, in Black Ops 6, it would crash the game half the time when I switched resolutions for doing different benchmarks with the 4090. Not an issue with AMD. Here's another issue, eARC. So for audio, I have a DisplayPort in my desktop to my 4K 240Hz OLED monitor, and then that monitor has an HDMI connected through an eARC compatible port to a soundbar. That's how I send audio to the monitor to my soundbar. Sometimes with the 4090 or the 4060 I recently tested too, it would just not use eARC, not send audio to the soundbar. That never happens anymore. I don't have to like sometimes boot up, notice there's no audio, get annoyed, and then like click a few settings in the monitor just to jostle it into my 4090 noticing, oh, I should be sending audio. Doesn't happen with AMD. Another one here. The updating for AMD is lightning fast now. I know. Look, I'm someone who's been using Nvidia mostly since 2021. Of course, I have a laptop right here that's AMD. That's never had any issues. And I have to say that at this point, the AMD driver installer seems to be quicker and more reliable than Nvidia. Again, something that blew me away. And then I'm going to get into this much more now when I start talking about benchmarks. CPU bottlenecking. Oh my Lord. I mean, look, if you're only at 4K 120, or certainly if you game below 100 hertz, and you have a modern CPU, this isn't a huge issue, I would say, but I have a 240 hertz monitor, and there are some games I want to play above 144 hertz, and NVIDIA is pretty consistently CPU bottleneck compared to AMD, to the point that I would say if you're buying an NVIDIA graphics card, you should just add extra money to what your CPU should cost, because it's going to need to be faster with the driver overhead issue that so many people have talked about for years with NVIDIA. Like, for example, in Age of Empires 4, a big 300 population modded room with 8 players, giant battles going on. Yeah, sometimes you'll get frame drops when the AI is being overloaded on like the single primary core. But with AMD, it never dropped below 100. With the 4090, card that should be stronger, it would drop to 80 frames per second sometimes. And that's just unacceptable. Again, you have to factor in, okay, well, if that's going to happen, are you really getting more performance, even if average frame rates on review websites says it is? I think that's a real question here. And I was stunned at how often this was an issue, because I'm using a Zen 4 X3D CPU. It's not the fastest, 9800 X3D is probably 30% faster, but still, most people don't have what I have, and I could find many examples where CPU bottlenecks were a major issue. All right, now let's move on to the actual performance differences between the 4090 and the 9070 XT, and you're going to find that it's nothing that surprising, if I'm being honest. In 4K, I found the 4090 to be around 27% faster than the 9070 XT, which is not crazy, right? Isn't the 4090 usually 35% faster than a 4080? 9070 XT is slightly faster than a 4080 in most reviews I've seen. And so, yeah, that was pretty consistent. I will say, though, it was notable. I know some people would hear 27% faster and go, oh, that's just like one tier, 1.5 tiers of performance. You might not always notice, and you won't. In a lot of games, you won't notice. But it was something that was a clear sacrifice, which isn't, again, a bad thing, really. This is, the 9070 XT costs half as much as what you'll pay for a 4090, or like a fourth as much or fifth as much as what you'll pay for a 5090. So I don't think that's a huge deal, but it is real. Like in Assassin's Creed Shadows, for example, I was getting close to the settings I'd probably end up using, and I was probably going to lock in somewhere around 4K 80 to 100 frames per second with mostly ultra settings. Those same settings going to AMD. I would probably have had to made do with like 65 to 75 frames per second, which I would have. I could have turned down more settings and gone to 4K 144 or higher. But it's a single player game that I think is beautiful, so I actually wanted the settings to be higher. I wanted to compromise a frame rate, and you'd have to compromise more on AMD. It was, like 25% slower, which isn't huge, but it is a 25% that I was going to have to accept if this was going to be my main graphics card. And actually, that Assassin's Creed Shadows example, I think that's a perfect way to tee up this scenario where I do think you might want to choose something like an RTX 4090 or 5090, I guess, over the 9070 XT. If you want the best 4K 120 Hz to 180 Hz card, the 4090 is faster than the 9070 XT. I mean, in some games, it's like 2 tiers faster, and it does have 50% more VRAM, 24 gigabytes instead of 16. It is a better card if that's what you want to do. And sure, the 5090 is faster than that if you want the best 4K 180 card that crashes all the time. If you can't tell, I don't really recommend the 5090. But yeah, only the 5090 and 4090 can give you that experience. But any card below those, and I think you are making a profound mistake by choosing Nvidia this generation. Either you aren't going to get much better performance in 4K, even a 5080, what's it going to be, 15-20% faster, while having all these driver issues and costing twice as much as the 9070 XT. It doesn't make sense. And if you're someone that says 1440p 240 is what you're aiming to do, well, notice I said up to 4K 180. That's because there are plenty of games where you're going to get into the Nvidia driver overhead issue. It's an issue that popped up in a bunch of games. And so Nvidia wins 4K, like 144 hertz with the 4090 and the 5090 versus AMD. Sure, if you want to crank everything up to ultra and not go much higher than that in frame rate, that is true. But if you're going for like 1440p 240, 1080p 240, Nvidia almost isn't an option. In fact, let me show you my 1080p results here. AMD was almost as fast in the games I tested. Maybe these are extreme examples, but I didn't test 1440p, but think about it. 27% faster than the 9070 XT my 4090 was in 4K, or like single digits faster in 1080p. That means at best probably split the difference. 1440p is probably going to be like 10 to 15% faster than for the 4090, which means if you're actually lowering settings enough, not just doing what me and other benchmarking tech tubers do, where they crank up settings to ultra to really test which graphics card is fastest. If you're not doing that and you're like, oh, okay, well, in this benchmark, it gets 100 frames, but I want to play at 200 frames, so I'm going to turn down some of these settings that I don't care about. Too bad if you're using Nvidia. It's not going to hit those peak frame rates. And I just think it is shocking this is still so prevalent for Nvidia, and it makes their cheaper cards less worth it, because most people that would get a 4090 will be okay, I think, with 4K 180 versus 240. But there's a lot of 1440p 240 hertz gamers right now, and I'm telling you, you're getting a worse experience if you buy a mid-range Nvidia card versus an AMD Nvidia card due to driver overhead issues and driver stability issues in general. And look, to be fair, I have a lot more testing to do with my 9070 XT. Like, I'd like to really explore overclocking a lot more and see if I can kind of, in lower resolutions, make the 9070 XT match my 4090. I've only messed up with it a little bit, but I've got an overclock working right now that runs at 3.2 gigahertz. Seems to give 5 to 10% more performance, so in 1080p, it might already close the gap in a few games, although certainly not all of them. I'd also like to do more qualitative testing. I played Assassin's Creed Shadows, I played Age of Empires, and a couple other games, but I'd really like to test Deep Rock Galactic and far more games to see if I can find scenarios where RDNA 4 crushes it or falls very behind Nvidia. And ultimately, actually, I think I'm just going to need a couple weeks to see if I start to think that I miss DLSS, because I don't have DLSS with the 9070 XT. But I'm going to say, at least today, that 9070 XT, it's still in my desktop, and I am not feeling pressured to throw my 4090 back in there. And so while I do think I have a lot more testing to do, I decided the review was ready because my overall opinion is done. ultimately, I decided that, well, I may come up with new opinions, and you should subscribe to this YouTube channel to hear me continue to say things I've noticed about RDNA 4 in upcoming broken silicons over the next few months. The overall point still stands, and that is at the same price right now, I would probably choose a 9070 XT over a 5070 Ti, or paying double for a 5080, because Blackwell is not worth the problems. It's not worth finding out it's missing ROPs, or your connectors melted, or you have black screens, or black ops crashes every time you change the resolution. It's not worth it. DLSS might be more ubiquitous than FSR4, but I think that's going to change at Computex a little bit here. From what I'm hearing, AMD is going to announce far more partnerships with FSR4. And so I don't think having a slightly better upscaler, one that reviewers agree is better than DLSS 3, by the way. So if you thought DLSS 3 was crazy and destroyed AMD, most reviewers say FSR4 is better than that. I don't think it's worth a slightly better upscaler in some games to have all of these software issues that apparently I've been dealing with this whole time that I should have been blaming on Nvidia. That is my conclusion with my 9070 XT review. I think it's nearly worth the same price as its Blackwell mid-range counterparts. But actually, speaking of FSR4 and Computex, will AMD announce FSR4 for RDNA 3 soon? Well, so far AMD's been dancing around saying if they will, but technically AMD hasn't quite confirmed they will bring FSR4 to RDNA 3, just suggested they probably will. Well, there's been leaks all over the place, including from this channel. Well, I got good news and bad news. I reached out to one of my sources that has connections to the teams working on FSR4, and here's what the person says. This person works at AMD, says they were hoping to have more updates for me this week about efforts to port FSR4 to RDNA 3, but unfortunately the people that this person knows have nothing new to say recently. The only thing this person was told that was worth mentioning is that their counterparts said that they are taking their time to port FSR4 to RDNA 3, that they are not rushing it, because they realize how important it is that they get it right and that it performs at an optimal level, because they know fans are really excited for this to happen, and it would be a huge marketing win for AMD. And so, yeah, I agree with what my source says. I can't tell you when FSR4 will be ready for RDNA 3. I think it's plausible that they might announce it's coming soon at Computex, but what I can tell you is do not expect it to happen in the next couple of weeks. AMD is taking their time doing it. But notice what I just said. They are taking their time doing it. They are doing it. AMD is working to bring FSR4 to RDNA 3. Full stop. And I think that is worth leaking to you all today, because having that confirmation, I do think that's exciting. All right, well, that's actually going to do it then for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure that you subscribe to the Moore's Law YouTube channel and ring the bell button. A new Broken Silicon will be coming out next week. I will have new leaks about the 9060 XT and that, and things that I'm hearing about Computex. So if you like the leaks coming out of this channel, don't miss the next Broken Silicon. This video is already too long. You're going to hear more leaks in that. Also, consider joining the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon. If you do, you'll get access to a catalog of hundreds of extra bonus die shrinks. One just came out this week, talking with the community about what me, Dan, and everyone's best advice is for getting GPUs and PC components during shortages. There's some really good advice in there. And of course, you also get access to asking guest questions. You can get access to ad-free early versions of Broken Silicon, a Discord with thousands of fans on there that would love to respectfully talk with you. I'm one of those people that's on the Discord. And yeah, like I always say though, if you made it this far into my video, at a minimum, thank you for watching.